Al-Qaeda in Yemen has claimed responsibility for last week's attack on Charlie Hebdo, just a few months after President Obama cited Yemen as a counter-terror success story.
This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one that we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years.
Thanks to our military and counterterrorism professionals, we took out Osama bin Laden, much of al-Qaeda's leadership in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and leaders of al-Qaeda affiliates in Yemen and Somalia.
And then, how can the administration expect to vanquish terror if it won't even identify who the enemy is?
The leader of France, your ally in this effort, has put a name on this ideology, which he calls radical Islam. You have gone bent over backwards, to not ever say that.
I certainly wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm repeating the justification that they have cited that I think is completely illegitimate, right? That they have invoked Islam to try to justify their attacks. We have not chosen to use that label because it doesn't seem to accurately describe what had happened.
Okay. The Yemen connection has raised new concerns about transfers of former Gitmo detainees to the country, especially in light of the rate that former prisoners are returning to the battlefield. Republican senators are now introducing legislation that would put serious restrictions on the president's ability to transfer prisoners out of Guantanamo Bay for the remainder of his term. And I just took a look, Eric, earlier today. I understand the goal and the desire to close Gitmo. However, in this situation, of the 127 detainees left, if we have a list here, 81 of those detainees are from Yemen. And one of the things you could try to do with Gitmo is send them to other countries and expect them to hold them and make sure that they're not going to return to the battlefield. But I think this legislation by the Republicans is kind of smart. It's just like it's asking for a pause, like let's gather ourselves before we rush to closing Gitmo.
And how do they know? I think earlier today the White House or someone from Capitol Hill on the Democrat side said that the recidivism rate isn't as high as a lot of the news agencies have been reporting. How do you know?
Well, we had the Director of National Intelligence said it's 30%.
Yeah, and they tried to squash that today. They put the number somewhere around under 10%. The point is, how do you know? If you're tracking them and you're following them and they return to the battle, kill them. I mean, they should be 100% let them go back and then kill them. But the only way to know if it's 10% or 30% is because you know where they are. If you know where they are, kill them. So today a couple of pieces of news came out. Islamic State, Al-Qaeda took responsibility for the attack in Paris. And also Boko Haram released a video praising the attack in Paris. So we now know that Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS, they're all together. They're all they're all cut from the same cloth, and the cloth is Muslim extremism, Islamic extremism. It's time we start calling it what it is. That's exactly what it is.
And there was breaking news, Kimberly, right before we came on air, that there was an Ohio man. His name is Christopher Lee Cornell. He's also known as Raheel Mahrous Ubaida. He was arrested earlier today on charges of attempting to kill a U.S. government official. He wanted to wage jihad with bombs and guns inside the Capitol building. We don't know a lot about him yet, if he was sophisticated or not, but we know that there's at least somebody that law enforcement was able to get before he tried anything.
Right. I mean, this is no surprise. We know we don't need to have a bulletin or a top-secret memo come out to say that there are sleeper cells that are active in the United States. They are waiting for the opportunity. The one thing that we know for sure that the enemy has is patience. And they have patience to wait to take the path of least resistance. They will take their moment here, and we have to be ready. That's why it's really problematic that this administration, liberals in general, have such a reluctance, such a loathing to call the enemy what it is. Why not label them? And why are we releasing them? We're directly helping their recruiting efforts and resupplying their forces by letting these guys out of Gitmo. Why would we do that? They're lucky to even be in Gitmo. Those guys are lucky to even be breathing. And now we're going to let them back go to Yemen, to the Star Wars bar scene, but that they can go out and do more harm in the United States, in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, or wherever they can find an opportunity. It's frightening, and I fully support this legislation. Put a pause on it.
It used to be, Bob, that the goal for closing Gitmo from the Obama administration side was because it hurt our national security. But in all of the recent attacks from Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda in Canada, Australia, in England with that beheading, no one is siding, none of those organizations, terrorist organizations loosely affiliated, are citing Gitmo. They're citing jihad. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, for folks sitting at home, is it understandable that they are confused about the president's position on fighting terror? When especially at the podium, they go to such lengths to not say Islamic terror?
Well, we talked about this yesterday. First of all, the last of the people in Guantanamo are probably the worst of the. I mean, the Bush administration let a lot of them go. The Obama administration let a lot of them go. Some of them did go back to the battlefield. We don't know how many exactly. And by the way, using these terms, Al Qaeda and the rest, I mean, they all fly under the same banner, right? They're Islamic jihadists. And I have to think that somewhere the president made a decision. Maybe because he didn't want to, he thought he was going to alienate 1.1 billion,
1.6 billion,
1.6 billion Muslims, that he made a decision not to use that. This is not, we said this yesterday, it's not a coincidence that all these, whether from the press office or the Secretary of State, don't use the word.
Right.
It had to come from the president, and what his reason is, I don't know.
Do you think he's going to need to explain that?
I think he should explain it before you, as I said yesterday, I don't think you explain it by having people not say it.
Right.
I think you need to say, here's
just explain why
we don't want to do it. Right. Yeah.
Okay, and we can,
I know, Greg, but yesterday we were trying to figure out what was the term that they were avoiding.
Yes.
War on terror.
They
wouldn't say war on terror. Don't you remember? They were asked
that was
time
one of
and
the
time
phrases,
again,
yeah.
and they just couldn't say to bring themselves to call a war on terror. We'll combat terrorism, but it was, and now for this, for some reason, they have these weird word games. They just don't want to say things like it's not happening.
But it's like the overseas contingency
really
operation.
Right.
Well, I think it does matter. Let me ask Greg, actually, in terms of if you're trying to be persuasive, you're trying to lead an effort to counter terrorism, doesn't matter what you call it.
Well, imagine if you had an exterminator come to your house.
Okay.
And you have a serious roach problem, and he goes, we don't like to call them roaches. We like to call them little happy flowery things. And we don't want to kill them. We need to re-educate them. You can't educate killers, especially ruthless killers. The idea, what troubles me mostly, we've had this debate about Gitmo forever. It exposes a priority that doesn't make any sense. If you're in the middle of a snowstorm, the first thing you do is you don't strip to your undies. And that's what we're doing. Instead of closing Gitmo, we should be expanding it. We should be franchising it, make it like Taco Bell, but it's Terror Bell. And this is an interesting thing about the President Obama's concern over Islamophobia. Why the obsession to close Gitmo? That, in a weird way, exposes the president's bigotry. Because why would a prison that houses terrorists be offensive to Muslims if religion is not a factor? If you believe that religion is not a factor, you should not be worrying about offending 1.7 billion because you have a place that holds terrorists. But by making the link that somehow Gitmo is offensive to Muslims, you are the bigot, not us. I don't see a religion when I see a terrorist. I just see somebody you kill. If you take religion out of the equation, then why are they so sensitive after a terror attack? After every attack, they yell backlash, and that backlash is louder than anybody shouting radical Islam. That's hypocrisy. Why the defensive stance after people kill? That's Islamophobia.
And they have it.
Say one quick thing. I was talking to a former military general over at O'Reilly's earlier, and he said, you know, Bob, I don't agree with anything, but I will say this. You're right about ISIS. ISIS has taken a beating on the ground. Their leadership, they've lost land. And, interestingly enough, I didn't know this, in Afghanistan, the Afghani military is actually doing a pretty good job holding off the Taliban. So
that wasn't Peters that said that.
No, it certainly wasn't. That was
well, and that would be well and good. And France,
I mean, I just think we ought to at least acknowledge the fact that there is some progress being made.
Well, I think it's debatable. And
can
go ahead.
Even go further? They're telling me in my ear that there's some breaking news right now that ISIS just infiltrated where? Southern Afghanistan. Okay, so they're telling me that ISIS just infiltrated southern Afghanistan over the last couple of days.
You know what?
I'm simply saying for 2 or 3 days you said it's working and we're pushing them back.
Because they're being pushed back. They're going to one place they can find protection, which is in
southern. You know what we should do?
Afghanistan.
Push them back into Syria. Stop trying to kill them. Just push them back into Syria. Let Syria deal with their problem that they started. That's where they came from.
But pushing back isn't a philosophy to win a war. That's just like shuffling around like a shell game. You have to destroy them. You have to annihilate them so they are no longer in existence, because otherwise then they crop back up and they get a new name, they hire a New York PR company, and now it's not ISIS or AQAP, it's somebody else.
Alnos for front. Let me ask you one thing about taking your eye off the ball when you were talking about the priorities and stripping to your undies in a snowstorm or whatever that was. The fact that we have so many Western nationals from Europe and America that have gone to places like Syria or Yemen, now to Libya or Afghanistan to train, and they've come back. I mean, isn't our bigger problem now the fact that we have the sleeper cells to deal with? So we're fighting on multiple fronts, and all of a sudden we're right back to a global war on terror.
Yeah, I mean, these actually aren't people that weren't born here. These are radicalized citizens, which means why we need the NSA. We need people to track these people because they're not foreigners. They are here. They are radicalized in prison. You know, the media creates a straw man army. Whenever you condemn radical Islam, what they do is they say, but there are millions of peaceful Muslims. So why do you say this? But did it ever occur to you that there can be both? That there are peaceful Muslims and there are bad ones? And every time that you say that, you are making it harder and harder for the peaceful Muslims to actually stand up and fight the non-peaceful ones by combining them together. They use children to kill. You cannot have a summit on tolerance to dissuade people from using children to blow things up. If they use children to blow things up, you can't persuade them of anything. It's like taking an earthquake to a therapist or teach an end table to dance. It's impossible. Buying a magazine is not enough.
We've got what France learned about homegrown cells that they paid a price for. We are also having homegrown cells here.
Right.
And I would start in Detroit if I were looking for them, by the way.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's interesting to see, it's sometimes it's 4 against 1 here. Sometimes we all agree like Islamic terrorism. But it would be nice to have somebody up in the booth up there that actually gives you some information that could be helpful.
You didn't think that was helpful?
Oh, okay. Whatever. But for days, Bob, you've been making a point on something that people have said on Twitter. I literally get bombed. Why do you let him say that, and why don't you push back on
because
something?
It's true.
Because it's 5 people sitting here, and we have literally 7 or 8 minutes, and we got to get out of these segments. That's why. Before we go, we're running out of time. Can we just talk about what CARE did today? For
yes, I was going to call for that soundbite. Oh, I get to go ahead. I get the permission from the man upstairs. All right. Watch this press conference earlier today. CARE's complaining about Charlie Hebdo's response with a cartoon that they put up yesterday and sold about 5 million magazines about.
We cannot allow ourselves to be victims to extremists on both sides. While we defend the right for someone to speak their mind, to draw whatever they want, we are not willing to respect the feelings of almost 2 billion people around the world, 25% or 20% of the world population.
It would have been amazing if he'd come out and said, I love it.
Yeah. He should have just come out and said, look, we condemn those acts that happened over there and point a finger at violent extremists within Islam. Instead, he said there are extremists on both sides. The problem is with the violent extremists on Islam's sides, they're the murderous thugs killing people, and on the other that they call extremists, they're the ones who are dead and lying in blood in office buildings, innocent people, not extremists.
Sounds like Marie Harf. There are multiple extremist ideologies that abound.
Failed once again to take an opportunity to be what you're supposed to be. Council for American Islamic Relations. You didn't do it, CARE, once again.
You know, the other thing they did, this guy also, did I miss it? Did he say we defend the right to say what you want to say? That's what he said, right? I mean,
well, he did, but then he said there are extremists on both sides, and they didn't like the cover, and they're complaining about it.
Too bad.
Think about this. We know with rape that you never, ever blame the victim. But with terror, you can.
Always.
If you're CARE.
Yeah.
See that contradiction?
It's always their fault, too.
Hey, everybody, we're going to go to break.
They had it coming. They dressed the part.
That's right. And
Charlie was just like a woman who dressed suggestively.
I do really have to get out of here.
I know.
But we're all going to think about your snowstorm unclothing.
Would anybody like a T-shirt? I'm going to have that cartoon made into a T-shirt. I'm going to wear it. Anybody else want to wear it?
Okay.
So anybody out there wants
Can we wear it on? Can we wear it?
Will it be a V-neck?
They wouldn't let me wear it on the air. I tried to today.
Will it be a V-neck or a crew neck?
I would like to see you in a tank top. How about a mesh tank top?
A belly shirt.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, now we're all going to have to contemplate that in a commercial break.